We collect so much data, but oftentimes you don't really use the data. You don't interpret it and you don't learn from the data. I think in the long run, if we have more and more data, we can very accurately track whether there is a health risk or not.
So what is it that you guys do, and how was the ideation? Like, where was it born from?
If I use a Garmin, for example, I wouldn't want to wear that when I sleep because it's too heavy. So I have maybe a smart ring on the side. But how do I bring that data together and tell one device or the other device, I didn't sleep well, maybe I shouldn't train as much today?
I'm trying to think, like, why has it not been done before? Because it sounds like a very simple thing, a good thing to do.
Hardware is not an easy thing to deal with. There are a lot of DePIN projects out there that call themselves DePIN, but they're not really DePIN, and they're not really worth exploring. One of the key problems we see with DePIN is that
Hey Max, how are you?
Hey, Sina, doing very well. Thank you for having me.
No, my absolute pleasure. It's great to have you on the We Are DePIN podcast. I'd love to jump in straight away because I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a while. So let's jump in straight into GM Network. So what is it that you guys do, and how did you how was the ideation? Like, where was it born from?
Right. Yeah, like you said, glad to finally meet you. And I think, to be kind of frank, we started off from a different viewpoint. So for a couple of months, starting out last year, we've explored several different DePIN use cases. And from our own perspective, we've always been into sports, into, different kind of sports, whether it's running, whether it's football. And we thought that, you have different kinds of sports tracking devices, like a Garmin, like a Whoop, like an Aura Ring. But it was always difficult to get all the data together in one place, and then also use that data to improve your workouts. So what GM is trying to do is not just building a community of sports enthusiasts, but also building an ecosystem, an app that allows you to connect all of your tracking devices, whether it's like a smartwatch or a smart ring, whatever it is that you use for your fitness tracking, and then use AI to take that data and train a model that helps you to improve your workouts and improve your fitness overall.
Sounds very cool. Why was it sport specifically you wanted to focus on?
I think for us, like I said, we've always been very much into sports. So even for previous projects, we always used to host several different sports events, like going to conferences like DEF CON, like EFCC. We've always been hosting football tournaments, runs in the early mornings, hikes, for example, because we think sports is something that's universal, that brings people together, no matter which ecosystem they're from or which field in crypto, for example, they're focusing on. Sports is something that unites people. And we're not just sports enthusiasts, but we're also very, tech heavy guys and techie nerds, I would say. So we love looking at data and using data to improve our current situation, which is why we decided we actually want to look into our training data and use the existing data that we've been tracking for months or years to improve our workout schedules and the way we train.
Very cool. So that was the ideation process, and then what was the next step in terms of, I guess, like validation or building product?
So in the very beginning, we actually started out building an ecosystem of DePIN products, right? So it was not just focused on sports, but it was also focused on different kind of consumer and smart devices that were somewhere related to DePIN, right? So those included also smart glasses, smart rings, earphones, any sort of consumer focused tech device. But then we kind of figured it would be more interesting to actually focus on sports and kind of solve that issue that has been triggering us, where you have different kind of devices, because that's something we do. And then it was always difficult to, gather data manually from different kind of devices, different apps, and then bring it all together so you can actually look into it and maybe connect it to different kind of devices, right? Because if I have my watch, if I use a Garmin, for example, I wouldn't want to wear that when I sleep because it's too heavy. So I have maybe a smart ring on the side. But how do I bring that data together and tell one device or the other device, hey, I didn't sleep well, maybe I shouldn't train as much today, right? So we kind of wanted to create this interconnected ecosystem of sports devices.
It does make sense because there are so many of these wearable devices and then non-wearable devices that all track data, but there isn't like one solution that brings them all together. Um, Why like make that on chain, or like why make that a Web3 solution?
So there are two main reasons for that. First of all, I think the most prominent or the largest reason is that health data and like fitness data is very sensible data, right? So we wouldn't want to, or you wouldn't want to give your data to third parties, and maybe those third parties have then someone else that is interested into your data, and then they sell it off, right? So the first thing is we wanted to keep the data secure. We wanted to keep the data safe on the user side, right? Without having anyone else kind of interfere with that. The second reason is we wanted to, because we have several different devices, right? So we wanted to trace the data back to one single wallet address where we can also kind of verify, okay, this is a genuine user, this is a real person that's doing sports and that's tracking their data.
And you guys combine AI with IoT as well, right?
Exactly. So this is a term that we call AIoT, right? So AI plus IoT. Basically, what it is if you use your different kind of devices, like your fitness watch, you track data, and then we use that data to not only collect the data but also interpret the data, right? So, for example, you sleep, you run, you walk, you hike, you play football, and over months you have more and more data, and you can kind of interpret the data, look into the data, see how your heart rate is performing, how your, I don't know, steps per minute are performing, your pace when you're running, your oxygen levels in your blood, whatever, right? So there is a couple of aspects to it. It's, for example, on the one hand side, it's looking into, okay, can I lower my heart rate when I'm running? Can I increase my speed per kilometer? But also, for example, on a health perspective, even if I'm not doing sports, how is my base level of heart rate, right? Has that been increasing or decreasing? Could there be a certain health risk connected to that? And I think in the long run, if we have more and more data and start interpreting more and more data, there could be the chance that we get in a direction where we can very accurately track whether there is a health risk or not.
Mm, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Just going back to your earlier point in terms of why bring it into a Web3 solution, and you talked about, I guess, like the sensitivity of the data and the sort of privacy. Um, I guess as well, it comes to the scalability of like that data as well, like in terms of like recording it, right? Like the sensitivity, you could protect the data like off chain as well in a Web2 solution. But yeah, what are some other sort of benefits, I guess, from making it? I'm trying to think like why has it not been done before? Because it sounds like a very like simple thing, like a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's definitely very true. That's also something we've kind of been thinking about. I think in the main reason for that is that you have so many different kind of ecosystems, and each ecosystem just wants to do their same thing. So they might be, building something similar on a smaller scale, but just for example, the Apple Fitness system or the Huawei ecosystem or the Google Fitness system, right? But if we can get access to those accounts like the Apple Fitness and you just connect it to our app, doing that with a couple other things like Huawei, like Google, then we can get access to that and bring it into one place because we're not like really limited to one sort of device, right? Why is it Web3? I think for us, of course, first of all, we come from a Web3 background, right? So we know that there is a lot of potential in scalability, for instance, especially when it comes to very new things, right? And also recently, what we've noticed in the Web3 industry is that there is a very strong growing trend of people being into fitness, being into, biohacking, being into sports. And sports is just, something that is very, yeah, like I said, something that universally brings people together, right? So a very strong community building tool. And also, like I mentioned before the call today, for us, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Web3 feeling, right? So we use blockchain in the background to secure the data and trace it back to the wallets. Yes, that's true. But it wouldn't really feel like you're actually interacting with a Web3 or blockchain crypto app, right, in the first place. So from the user experience side, it's going to be very Web2, where you log in with your X account or your email account, and then in the background, we'll set up a smart wallet for you, and then you just connect your devices, and it's going to be similar to Google Home or Apple Home or something in that kind of area.
What's been the greatest challenge when it comes to like building and growing something like this?
I think it really comes down to the perspective. First of all, of course, like with every project in the beginning, the kind of community building is something that is not always easy, right? Not only finding the right people, but also then convincing them that this is actually something that's necessary or that they should try. Given the fact that we've done a lot of sports events in the past and also come from a community building area and background, I think for now we've been doing quite well. So even for like the GM ecosystem, we've been able to, collect a couple 100,000 addresses so far. But then apart from that, we've also started building our own hardware device, right? So apart from all of the different devices that you could connect to your app, like your existing Apple Watch or a Garmin, we've also come up with a GM band, which is a very simple fitness tracker that allows for 24/7 heart rate monitoring, sleep monitoring, and different kind of, fitness activity monitoring. And this is a very cheap entry level device, right? Because we said there might be people out there that only use their iPhone or their phone, their mobile device to track steps, but then they also want to track different kind of activities, heart rate, sleep, and kind of up their game, right? So we wanted to offer a very cheap option, which is like $99 at this point, to also get people started, that couldn't afford a Garmin, for example, right? Which is quite a large group. So in that kind of belonging, yes, hardware is not an easy thing to deal with, especially like when it comes to like logistics and also the design. But I mean, it says in the word hardware, right? It's not easyware. So
That's very true. And like, how did you build that initial community? Because being a new company, trying to solve a problem. So like, how did you build that initial community?
So I think there are two key areas, right? One is having a couple of large company partners, which I mean we were lucky enough to have those because Eigenlayer, for example, helped us to build the whole infrastructure as well as Altlayer, right? Helped us to build the whole roll up and everything that's behind. But apart from that, like I said, we have quite a strong background in community building. So over the last couple, 4 or 5 years, we've been connecting with many, many projects all across. But then, of course, this is something very, very new, right? Very different to everything that we've done before. So for us, I think it really comes down to, first of all, finding out who is the key user, and then also finding out how can I meet those key users, right? Because you could do one by one, but it's going to take much longer, right? So what we're going to do for now is hosting sports events, something that we've been doing for quite a long time, and then giving people something that they can try out, giving them the devices, giving them the mobile app to try, something that's tangible, right? And I feel like that's something that's really great about DePIN because it's in the blockchain and crypto space, but it's actually something people can touch, people can feel, and people can work with, right? So even if you've never dealt with crypto that much before, or even if you don't understand that much about it, if you have a product in hand and you can try it out and you can see what it does in real time almost, then I think that's a accelerator to kind of push you towards the step where you say, oh, this is interesting. I might look into that and kind of find out what's the tech behind it, right? In most cases, you wouldn't need that in the first place because, for example, if I call you on my phone, I don't know how a phone call really works, right? I just want to talk to you, Sina, and kind of ask you, what's the next episode of the DePIN podcast here. But I think that's where we kind of want to lead people, right? Give them something tangible that they can work with, use, and then later on, slowly, step by step, they're gonna figure out, oh, this is actually what's behind it.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk more about the how did you pronounce it? AIoT? AOT?
Yes.
So I'm assuming like the sport thing, maybe that might be the first iteration of the AOT. Like, is there any other use cases that you see going forward with that?
I do think so. So in our case, the sports area is the very first area. But then, looking at different kind of consumer devices, any sort of device that is collecting data could be an AI OT device potentially, right? Because even if you're thinking about, I don't know, large electricity plants, right? If those plants collect data and you have like, let's say, some DePIN weather stations nearby set up, and it's interconnected, and the weather station tells you, oh, based on the data that we've been tracking so far, the sun is going to be slightly stronger or going to move in this direction, and then all of the solar panels are kind of, moved in that direction as well. But then also in a medical sense, right? If I have different sensors, I measure medical data, which is like one level above what we're doing right now. And you kind of look into, identifying cancer cells, right? I mean, this is a very high level example here, but I think this is something that's already been done, right? In that medical sense. But I think there is a lot of potential to using AI and interpreting the data that we already have, because in a lot of places we collect so much data, right? Like even now, just using your phone, you collect so much data, but oftentimes you don't really use the data, you don't interpret it, and you don't learn from the data, right? So I think there is a huge potential behind that to improve even small day-to-day actions.
Mm. I can see that for sure. Is that something that you guys would move into, or is it something that you would probably like just make the sort of the platform available for other people to build on top of?
So for now, I think the sports area is kind of the starting area, right? We've been exploring to, work with different other devices, different kind of areas, and even like on levels where, it's more advanced, like a medical level, right? Of course, then you also have to be careful, because even in the early stage or like in a more advanced stage, it's not going to be like 100% like medical device, right? And medical advice. But definitely, I think we're definitely open to, work with other partners in the future. For now, I think I'm not sure if you share that view, but for us, like in the deep in space, like with every space in crypto, something that becomes popular very, very fast also gets a couple of projects in that, just want a piece from the success cake. So what we feel like these days is that there are a lot of deep in projects out there that call themselves deep in, but they're not really deep in, right? And they're not really, maybe worth exploring. So still at this point, we're very careful, trying to build something that is actually not half baked and something that people can actually use, have a benefit from, and then slowly, slowly expand.
And where are you hoping to take the business in the next sort of like 12, 18, like 24 months, in terms of like product growth, community growth? Like, yeah, what are the plans?
So first of all, I mean, onboarding the main like early user base is one of the bigger steps, right? We've had an early contributors program running over the last couple of months, where we've had a couple 100,000 addresses collected so far. But then, of course, it comes down to really finding people that are actually open to, try the app, try the devices, track data, and also provide us with feedback, right? But it's not like, I mean, that from a crypto perspective, it's not always about having people in your community that ask you when airdrop or when token, when TGE, right? It's about finding users that are genuinely interested in using the devices, and then also kind of using the power of word of mouth to, pass on the word. And what we're trying to do is build a crypto sports community that is larger than just the ecosystem, like I said in the beginning, right? Because now I feel like it's getting more and more popular, but still it's kind of spread across different ecosystems, and everything is very close, and they're just, open for their own people. But the thing is, like, why don't you open up and connect with others and kind of figure out, if there is I don't want to use the word synergy because it's overused and has a kind of bad touch to it in the crypto scene. But yeah, maybe, ways to work with other people as well. And like I said, sports is universal, right?
Yeah. Are you guys gonna be doing anything like, I guess, like Sweatcoin does, where they reward users for undertaking, steps in a day, or like any sort of actions? Because you've got all that data, and is there any sort of like reward mechanisms you want to be building in?
Yes, yes. So in a sense, your question is also when TG, right? No, just just kidding. No, but yes, so there will be a token sooner or later, and what we're planning to do is also to have a certain incentive there, so people keep exercising, keep I wouldn't say providing data, but also keep exercising and doing their sports. So there's going to be sports challenges, something we already started out with. So for the last couple of days, we had a running challenge. We're going to have a sleeping challenge. We're going to have different kind of, activity challenges where you can compete with friends. And then the more activities you do or the more steps you run, the more data you track, the more incentives you're going to get, right? And that could be, for example, if I just use my phone, it's a simple 1x. If I connect maybe a Whoop or our GM band, it's a 2x. If I connect another device to it, my Garmin, and provide additional tracking data, then it's a 3x, right? So there is going to be levels to it and people are going to be incentivized. But the main key here is still to have a product that can be used even if there is no token, right? Because that's also one of the key problems we see with DePIN is that with some projects you have these like large routers sitting around in your living room, and I mean you earn some tokens while the market is up, that's great, but then once the market is down it just collects dust and stands around and there is no real use case to it. So we want to provide something that people can use even without a token, and then if there is a token, well, that's even better, right?
I think that's a good strategy because, as you said, a lot of these projects are basically just tokens now. They don't have products and they don't have really a direction, but they've just become like tokens, essentially. So yeah, I agree. I think that's the approach that a lot of companies are taking now. Is like they think about product first before token, whereas in previous cycles it was very much token first. Which is I guess like the market is maturing in that sense, which is a good thing. We're going to wrap up the podcast very soon, Max, but I already wanted to ask you, what is, and I asked this to all my guests, but they come on the podcast, what is your favorite use case of DePIN outside of what you guys are immediately doing?
So I think something that I mentioned earlier is that right now there are a lot of projects out there that say, hey, DePIN is cool. We might want to, start our own DePIN projects. And they come up with a device idea, which is basically some smart device produced in Shenzhen in China, and they white label it and throw it on the market. And it's like a device that, that I could buy from Huawei or Xiaomi or any other brand for $50, but from them it's $400 because there is a token. But then the token is really useless after a couple of months once the project is done, right? So for that kind of area, I don't think that this is really DePIN because it doesn't really align with the core term or definition of DePIN. For me personally, these days, it's more things that are not just tangible, but that have a real world effect, right? So whether that is wind energy, whether that is ride sharing, I think you had one of the episodes, the early episodes on that as well.
Yeah,
If
Drive.
people are interested, yeah, with Drive,
Mm.
exactly. But then apart from that, also like solar energy, I think is a super interesting area. And then even like weather tracking, I think personally is quite interesting. Like people always ask me, man, that's quite silly, right? Weather tracking. But to be honest, if you're like outside, if you're doing hikes, if you're doing, I don't know, cycling, whatever, or you have a second home that is very, rural in a rural area, I think having those kind of, yeah, your own weather stations would actually also make sense in a way. So I think there are definitely a lot of interesting areas popping up right now, and that's something also that's going to continue. But with any sort of innovation, of course, there is also a lot of projects, that don't have that sort of value. So for us, it's also going to be kind of a way of checking, okay, is this project actually something that's going to be around? Is this something that we can work with? Or is that just something because, it's popular right now and it's going to be gone in 2 months?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a very good point. Max, we're gonna wrap up the podcast there. It's been such a pleasure having you on and talking about GM Network. It would be great to hear more. So I'm sure people will follow. So yeah, how's best for people to follow you and the business going forward?
So you can find our website called gmnetwork.ai. Right now, it's still a little bit confusing as we haven't really focused on the community side yet. But there's also a Twitter channel where we follow up with all the latest events and product updates that we have. It's called GM Network _AI. And we have a couple of cool events going on in DEF CON. So if you come to Thailand, make sure to meet us there. There's going to be football, volleyball, basketball, Muay Thai, yoga. So a little bit for everyone, right? And we'll bring some of the devices. We'll bring the mobile app, and you'll be able to test all of that. And there's also going to be some very cool GM swag, limited to all of those coming to Thailand.
Nice, nice. All right, thank you so much, Max. I think this episode will actually go out after DevCon, I'll be honest. But so if you were there, definitely leave the thumbs up in the comments. But yeah, Max, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you.